We are about to hear from Maarten, Haijer, Secretary of the European Gaming and Betting Association, EGBA. The Spanish online market does not, of course, exist in isolation. There are developments taking place over here that are also taking place in other jurisdictions. There seem to be wider European trends toward advertising restrictions or even full bans, cross-operator deposit limits, as well as other restrictive measures. Because of this, I'm very interested, Maarten, in hearing your thoughts on the Spanish market from a comparative perspective. Do you think that Spain's online gambling regulations are more restrictive or less restrictive than other European jurisdictions? Or maybe are we somewhere in the middle? What do you think? If you would like to share your thoughts from the audience, please use the Slido app, scan the QR code, use the app, and in the meantime, let's hear what Maarten has to tell us. Thank you very much, Maarten.
Thank you very much, Willem. Thank you for organizing the event and for allowing me to speak to you. In my presentation, I will go into some of the things that have been discussed before by Mauro on the inter alia. And I'll also show you that, as Willem said, Spain is happening in a European development, and there are a bigger picture behind it as well. Maybe I'll shortly introduce ourselves to the extent that you don't know us, but we are a Brussels-based trade association. The members are on the bottom. As you can see, we only have 6 operators members, but they're very large. So Bet365, Entain, Flutter, 888. And from that perspective, we look at the different jurisdictions in Europe and not Spain in isolation. It's about 33% of the total European market that our members cover. And then we think about a third or maybe even more. It's about the incumbents. So other other non-incumbent operators are about a third of the market as well. So this is where our members operate, or at least where they have licenses. They have to be nuanced, of course. But as you can see, it's all around Europe. And over 260 licenses in 22 jurisdictions, which makes it a complicated business. There's a lot of rules and regulations that members need to comply with. There are lots of similarities. A lot of the regulations are similar, but not the same. And that gives a lot of, obviously, compliance risks as well. But there are a lot of similar discussions going on in different member states. So obviously, advertising is one of the main topics that has been discussed recently. Safer gambling now is the next one. But that's something that happens everywhere. Different levels. I think, if I answer your question, Spain is, I think, advanced in terms of developing a more comprehensive policy, not necessarily per se a good policy. And also, by the way, from public affairs point of view, we like to say there's bad regulation, but not over-regulation, because if you talk to a regulator and you start talking about over-regulation, you're out. I mean, the discussion stopped there. So we say there's bad regulation. But this is development recently, or the last 15 years. On the left, situation in 2009. We'll share the slides with you, so I mean, you're free to take pictures, but we'll share it with you. The situation on the left is in 2009. As you can see down here, in red are the monopolies, and in light red are unregulated markets. And now we're in 2024, sorry. And the last European Union monopoly, which is the Finnish one, is currently being changed into multi-licensing as well. So in 15 years' time, a huge change across Europe in terms of the types of regulation that we have. And I think there are 2 reasons. So the nice one to say is that European governments have realized online gambling is something that their citizens do, which is true. But I think the other reason is the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, and then the need to give more tax revenue. And obviously there was a large market there, unregulated or not very well regulated, and potential to make more tax revenue. So I think a large part of this development is to be follows the reason that governments are looking for more tax revenue, and I think you see that now as well with the new crisis. There's lots of talks about increasing tax revenue and increasing taxation. I think Spain was one of the first to regulate. I mean, Italy, of course, was the first one together with the UK. But what you see now in a lot of the new jurisdictions being regulated is that the discussion about the regulatory model gets completely entangled also with discussions around advertising restrictions and also safer gambling. So, for instance, the Netherlands, where I'm from, we have a very recent new gaming law regulating the online market, but head over heels now the discussions about advertising, more restrictive, safer gambling measures. And so this is an ongoing discussion. It's very complicated, very difficult to track. And I think talking about Maro before, what we notice, because we're focused solely on Europe, is that a lot of our members indeed have much more attention now, both in terms of personnel, but also in terms of budgets, for the new markets, Latin America, the US. And so where we had their undivided attention beforehand, now I think we need to share that, and probably a bit less than sharing that attention with the new markets. So I think the fact that there's more regulation, less margin, slower growth, impacts also our work in Europe. I'll give you some figures just about Europe. I think these are just one remark. These are slightly older figures. This month we will come up with the new figures. If you follow us online or on LinkedIn, you'll see the new figures, but the trends remain the same. So we'll publish new figures before the summer. But the interesting bit here, I think, is red is online market growth, blue is offline market growth, so brick and mortar, and green is it added up. But I think the good thing from a public policy point of view, public affairs point of view, is that the offline market continues to grow as well, because I think there's, in terms of selling what we want to sell, there's nothing as difficult as the online market growing and the offline market with the lotteries and a lot of political vested interest not growing. So I think that's a positive story to tell. Again, we'll share more updated figures soon. This is a very interesting one as well. I think something that Maarten touched upon. This is in blue, you see the size of the different markets in Europe. So it's from Sweden to Spain at the end. And then the red dots is the respective size of the online market of the total. And interestingly, Spain is the smallest online market in Europe. Again, that might change with the new figures, but that's the idea. And also interesting to see the 4 biggest markets, except for the UK, in Europe, so France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, have a relatively low internet market compared to the overall market. So either you can argue there's a lot of growth still possible, or you can argue that that might be the reason why a lot of the new restrictions for online gambling are there, because the offline market has a risk of being impacted by a larger online market, and that gives political incentive to protect the market. But this is an interesting one. And there might also be cultural differences, of course, as well. Then the last slide is the different products. Yeah, it's a complicated one, but I just have included because it shows that the different markets. Sorry, in blue is sports betting, red is casino, poker, lottery in green, and bingo. So there are very substantial differences. I think that's one learning of this. That might be cultural, simply because people have different preferences, but it might also be regulation is different, taxation might be different for different products, there might be advertising restrictions or not. And it also shows that although we do think standardization is very good in Europe, to have more standards, common standards, this shows that the markets are actually quite different still, and we don't know what the reason is, consumer preference or regulation. But there's not a one-size-fits-all solution if we don't have the same regulation across Europe, just by projecting one model on every different jurisdiction as they are now, because I think this shows that there are differences already. So I think in terms of the slides I want to show, I have 2 more minutes. I'll make sure that I quickly hop on to safer gambling, because that's what we're going to talk about in a panel. So it's the one topic that comes up everywhere, apart from advertising. I think it's there, it's here to stay, safer gambling. As an industry, we need to embrace it. Again, I think we need to be careful with words like over-regulation. And you can be cynical about it in terms of it's the cost of doing business, or you can be more sanguine about it, saying this is what we want to do, we want to take care of our customers. But one way or the other, we need to do it, we need to embrace it, and we need to show the regulator that we take that seriously. And that's also the reason why we at EGBA proposed 2 years ago to have markers of harm standardized in Europe, and also to make clear that we do value safer gambling, and it's good to have common technical standards. So from a bigger picture point of view, we want to be able to do a viable business. To have a viable business in Europe is you need to take care of your customer. A few quick ones. In this whole safer gambling area, what we do see across Europe that we have need to have a more personalized approach, so not a one-size-fits-all generic measures. So general deposit limits don't work. We need to go to targeted policies where markers of harm, and we talk about later, algorithms are important. Make sure that the people that are leisure players can play without too many unnecessary restrictions. But it means that you do need to take care of probably young people, vulnerable people, and the high-intensity players, as they're called in Spain. If the regulator requires certain very specific outcomes, I think that needs to be communicated very quickly, very clearly in the beginning, because we have members that have been fined in jurisdictions in Europe for not applying the rules clearly without the regulator being willing to say what the actual interpretation of the rules should be. And the fines are pretty steep, so we need to have clarity. And last one, we need to have flexibility, because we're developing very quickly new tools with technology. There's lots of learnings, but we're still at the early stage of that, and I think we'll discuss that later as well. So there should be flexibility both from the side of the operator, but also on the side of the government and the regulator, that if data comes available, there should be a willingness to also reconsider, review, and revisit requirements and legislation so that we really work to a genuine protection of the customers as the data shows. So I'll leave it at that. I look forward to the discussion. I'm happy to take questions either now or later.
Thank you, Maarten. Please stay there for a second. Perfect timing. We have one question from Slido from the audience here. So it's also, no, it's not in front of you. Will the EU try to consolidate, Maarten, the rules between EU members so commerce will not be affected?
I mean, I think that's a long way from us. There are lots of things being harmonized currently. So we have a new digital single act. And of course, rules on money laundering. There are more rules on financial services, and more rules on probably there will be on addictive design, online addictive design. So that's something you want to be aware of as well. Won't directly see on gambling, but it will affect our sector sooner or later as well. So there will be lots of rules, more and more encroaching on the sector, but I don't think there will be one piece of harmonization anytime soon.
That's quite clear. Maarten, we'll see you later. Thank you very much for now.